Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the PIs and the PI dashboards. Hooray! Very exciting, I know. We're really excited to share the new PI dashboards posted in Tableau with everyone. I know we've sent out the link before. I posted the link in the chat as well. And we're excited to walk through use of them. Maybe some of you have had a chance to click around a little bit already. And to see what's going on in there and start to think about them. And for those that haven't had a chance yet or took a look and were like, well, this is too much, I'm overwhelmed, today is the day to go through all of that. So we're excited to get a chance to talk through them with you. So hopefully by the end of our time together, you'll know how to access the dashboards and how to use them to get a sense of your program's performance over time and look up your performance on any individual cycle. So if possible, we suggest logging in to the dashboard right now on your computer and have it up simultaneously along with the webinar and clicking through along with us as we go along so you can see what everything looks like for your program. I'm going to be sharing some all New York State stuff and maybe some sample or volunteer programs up on my screen. So we'll all look at something together, but then you can also look at your program's performance and what it looks like for you. If you can't have both up simultaneously, that's okay. But if you can, then great, please go ahead and do so. So let's talk just for a few minutes about the PIs in general. I know many of you are very familiar with the PIs, but since there are a lot of new PMs coming into the system right now, or there may be some agency administrators or executive directors who aren't as involved in healthy families on a regular basis, let's just go over them for a minute. Now, the PIs, as you know, are a set of reports that we run and score on a semi-annual basis. We do them in April and October of every year. And they serve a couple of purposes. First, they provide a snapshot of each program's performance and status at a certain point in time. And they let us evaluate the performance of the Healthy Families New York system as a whole. So where are you right now? And where is everyone right now? They also give the programs an opportunity to self-evaluate. So based on the data, both in the actual reports and in the preparation for each reporting period, that can supplement your more informal or quotidian everyday observations. The PIs create a deadline for data entry into the MIS. The semi-annual deadlines help keep any data entry backlog from getting too high. So that's also useful. And CA, the central administration, also needs the PIs to monitor certain aspects of program implementation as required by the best practice standards. So in some cases, this helps us say, look, we are looking at these items and looking at performance twice a year. So we are definitely monitoring these pieces so we can know if we need to take further action. And finally, PI performance history can be used by OCFS for decisions about funding or program expansion. I really want to emphasize that one tough cycle doesn't doom a program for immediate cuts, but a longer pattern of significant struggles might indicate that something isn't going as expected, and it gives CA a starting point for further investigating program operations. So this isn't an all or nothing component. This is one piece that's looked at, but it is one important piece. All right, so how do you keep track of your program's performance and your history? So CHSR always sends out a PI performance report at the end of each cycle, and we will continue to do so. That part's not going away. I know programs collect and keep track of these reports, but they're individual, and they don't show history over time, and they're not meant to. So it doesn't show if, say, you're below target on an item, but you used to be much worse, you're actually making progress. It just shows where you are on that cycle as compared to the performance of all New York State. There's a little bit of context there, but not the history. And plus, it's an individual report. It's easy to lose it or misfile it, or it's somewhere in your email and you have to search back through it to find it. So the PI dashboards are meant to solve that particular problem. They include the program score on each item and your total score for the past, right now, 14 or so cycles. So that's about the past 7 years of data. Much more than here's your report for this one cycle. Basically, this is about the start of what I'll call the modern PIs, We have records that go back further, but the items are very different. How we scored things was very different. Maybe some of you who've been program managers or been around in healthy families for quite a while might remember some of these previous iterations, but we're going with trying to go for our more current definitions. And then show the scores used to some nice, really simple visualizations. If you're a newer program, you won't have data going all the way back to the beginning of those 14 cycles because you didn't exist. And that's fine. You might have a lot of blanks or not have as many bars on your graphs, then that's totally all right because you didn't exist in order to have the PIs. And always your first couple of cycles of PIs when you're a new program starting up probably aren't going to be great. There's a couple of things that you can control more, like does everyone get training on time? But you're still building up your capacity. You might not yet have families who have had the chance to be retained for a full year. So there's a build-up process and a startup process that we expect for a new program. So if you're a newer program, you won't have as much data. And those first couple of cycles of data are not something you really want to base your trend line on. But through time, you'll get more cycles, and eventually those older ones will fall off and you'll just be rotating through to the newer cycles. All right, so that's background. Now let's think about the dashboards themselves. The dashboards are hosted on a private Tableau server. So viewing them requires logging in after creating an account following our steps. So you should have received an email either from Tableau or from Moira Riley at CHSR to set up your account and set up your login information. This step means that the dashboards aren't available to any random person on the internet. You need to be logged in using an account that CHSR has approved. These accounts aren't free. We do have to pay for them. So right now, we're setting them up on a 1 per program basis. So we've distributed the information to each program manager to create an account for your program, and then share that login with anyone else on your team who needs to see the dashboards. Maybe there's an assistant program manager, maybe there's an agency director, maybe there's one supervisor who's super involved in these pieces, whoever makes sense on your end. So when you set up your account, we recommend not setting up your account with your bank account password, the password you use for all the rest of your life stuff, because it's meant to be shared. So right now, again, 1 account, 1 login per program that you as the program manager will share with whoever needs it. If you're a program manager and you don't have an account, or if you don't know if you have an account or you can't log in, please contact Moira. Moira, can you put your email in the chat so we can help you get set up and get everything sorted out if you need. All right, once you've created your account, we'll send you a link to the dashboards. I'm going to, again, put the link in here. If you want to go ahead and click on it, if you've got the setup for that in the moment, you'll need to click that link and log in. And once you log in, here's where I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Once you log in, you will see the dashboards. Woo, very exciting. So you'll probably log in first and see maybe something like this home page, which this map graphic is just a picture of all the counties with a healthy program. Obviously, this is going to get updated soon as new programs come online. We know that there's at least a couple of new ones that are in the process of starting up. And you can just click on this Access Healthy Families New York Performance Indicators button, or just go to the thumbnail that looks something like this with the pink and teal and purple. All right, these dashboards look best, and Tableau dashboards generally look best in full screen. So I'm going to go up here to this little box in box picture up in the top right of my browser. And I'm going to click on it to see this in full screen. Is everyone still seeing my screen? Great. All right, so let's orient ourselves. You can see the dashboard title, Healthy Families New York Performance Indicators. And then underneath it, these series of small gray boxes. There's a box for every PI item plus your total score. Underneath it, there's 2 selection dropdowns, one for program and one for cycle. It probably defaults to all New York State and to the last cycle of September of 2020. All the cycles are named by the last month of the reporting period. This seems like the clearest way to do it. And below that, there are 2 graphs. One showing performance on the PI item over time, the historical trend, and one showing performance on one particular cycle. one particular cycle, whichever cycle is selected. And then you've got some central descriptive text. So I'm going to go to PI 3, assessment timing, and we're going to use that first one to talk through the rest of the elements we see a little bit more. All right, so this page shows your performance on the third PI item, assessment timing. Did my camera go off for a sec? Okay, who knows what happens, whatever. For each cycle, as well as your score in one cycle. All right. As a program, you can see your program's performance and the performance for New York State. If you select any other program, the visualizations will just be blank. So you can see yourself and New York State overall. So OCFS, PCANI, and CHSR, we can see all of the programs. You as an individual program can see your program's performance. So just go ahead and select yourself if it's not selected already. And I'm going to leave it on New York State for the moment. For cycle, this dropdown determines what shows up in this right-hand bar graph. It's useful if you want to really focus on performance in your last cycle or at any one particular point in time beyond these overall trends. So for the moment, we're going to make it say March 2022. And then that bar changes just a little bit. So let's look at the central text. This defines what the item is all about. This is similar to the information that's on that PI details document that CHSR sends before each round of PIs every 6 months. But it's right up here on the screen in the context of performance. So we've got the definition, what we're measuring here, what our target to reach is, how it's scored, what the performance period is, what the assessment, what the date range is. So when you run this report in the MIS, if you want to match back up, what are you typing in? And then how all New York State was scored. In some cases, it's a little bit different than how individual programs are scored. All right, so let's look at this left graph. You've got historical trend in performance across all of the available cycles. Your program's performance is in teal. The Healthy Families target is in purple. You want your program's teal bar to be at or above the purple, except for creative outreach where you want it lower, but in every other case, you want to be at or above the purple target line. And then the overall New York State performance is the pink, is that pink line. That can give a sense of comparative context. So was the whole system doing great on this item? Was the whole system struggling? Were you doing great and the whole system was struggling, or vice versa? So if everyone's having a hard time on something and so are you, well, you know, it's probably not just you. There's a system-wide thing going on right now that you need to think about. When you mouse over the graph, it'll show you the exact numbers for each item for a cycle data point. So if you need to find the exact performance more than looking at the overall trend, this is one way to do it, is to mouse over the bars. Every time you mouse over, it'll update. So for here, for September 2019, it says what cycle it is. New York State average was 76%. The target was 80%. And then over here, the New York State average was 69%. So we've declined over time on assessment timing. Do you want to know, assessment timing is one of the items that's going to shift a little bit for in our next round of PIs with the implementation of one step. And so the definition here will just be updated with, as of March 2023, the item is now defined in this way. All right. All right, so for each of you who has your program up, or I guess we'll say, does anyone want to volunteer their program to be shown on the screen just for a minute?
You can put mine. I have a question about why I don't see something, but yeah, you can put mine, Margaret. It's fine.
All right. So Clinton, I'll pull you up. I'll note we have two different ones for Clinton because you were doing the combined enrollment pilot for a few years. And that meant that we were running some of the items a little bit differently for you. So we ran them traditionally, and then we ran them as based on combined enrollment practices. So this is the case for Clinton, for Orange, and for Bushwick, that you've got these two sets of dashboards. Moving forward, we're just going to keep updating the main Clinton one because now everyone is doing one step. So everyone will be reported on the same way. But for this period in time where you had something different and we were using, and it was appropriate to reset the start point on some items, we made a parallel set of dashboards for Clinton. So I'm going to go ahead and click on regular Clinton, not Clinton CE. And we'll go ahead and see what's going on here. So if we look at this, so the target line is at 80%. We've still got that same New York State performance. And again, we can see a while ago, all New York State was doing great on assessment timing. Then we were around the target line for a little while, and now we've dipped below. And generally, all New York State is not meeting this item. And fewer than 80% of cases have their assessment. Fewer of 80% of new cases who had assessments within the past 6 months had them within 2 weeks or no later than 2 weeks after TC's birth. And Clinton, it looks like from this, you're following the same pattern overall of, okay, you used to be pretty close to that 80% in general. And then over time, we've seen this decline. So you're a bit below the New York State average, but you're following the same shape of the line, the same trend and the same pattern overall. So maybe some of this is something that's going on at Clinton of why you're below the average, but some of it is just overall New York State's having a hard time on this item. And so that's what I'm getting out of this item when I look at your graph. So for the rest of you, when you look at your dashboards with your program's performance, these are the sorts of questions to ask yourself. How do I compare to the target? How do I compare to all New York State? And what's been my performance over time? And that's going to be the same sort of questions that you can ask yourself for all of these items.
Margaret, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I mean, looking at what you're looking at, and it looks a little bit different for me because in the drop down section for the select the cycle, I can drop down and it says September 2022. And it jumps down to other dates from September 2013, 2014, 15, 16. I don't have March 2022 in my selections.
You don't have March 22 or you don't have March 2020?
I don't have March 2022.
Okay,
It's not,
we'll
it's
check
not
on
in
that.
my drop down. So I just wanted to let you know that it's not there because I see what you're looking at you had it on March 2022 and it looked a little bit below 40%. And I can only select September 2022 and I'm right at 40%. I mean, it's not that I'm making an argument about that. It's just that I don't see the March. So that's why.
We'll go ahead and check on that and see what's going on
you.
with those pieces and make sure that everything is showing up. And there might be some cases as we get going on the dashboards and as everyone gets started up on this, I'm giving, and thank you for the questions and prompt. This is good to talk through. But also as you click around and you have questions, we'll hopefully have this recorded as a resource, but you can also contact us and say, I've got some questions. And probably we'll say, let's set up a Zoom call so we can screen share so we can see exactly what you're seeing and figure out if there's a technical issue on our end, if we need to adjust something, if something doesn't make sense or you're not seeing it, or if it's wait, click here, not there, and let's test out a couple of things in the implementation. So we'll do a little bit of checking on this one, but we might also say, let's set up a Zoom call to go through this, and same deal for everyone else. If you notice anything or have any questions. But I do want to note, there is no March 2020. And that is on purpose. We go straight from September 2019 to September 2020. We skip March 2020. That's because of COVID. We do not have official PIs for March 2020 because it was the very beginning of COVID and the last month leading with all of the shutdowns and all of the confusion and all of the stress. We knew that practices were not as expected, so we did not run the regular set of performance indicators and we didn't have them in the dashboard. We decided to just skip it entirely as opposed to putting the month in as a placeholder, putting the cycle in as a placeholder and having everyone look like they didn't meet. But that's not the case. We didn't measure for that cycle. So if you're clicking through, you're like, why is that one missing? Oh yeah, it's because COVID and everything changed a little bit because of that. All right. So let's take a look at a slightly more complicated, or at least a different item. So I'm going to go to PI 5, required forms, and give it a second to load. Again, it goes back to all New York State. And here for required forms, we're looking at whether the following forms were less than 25% invalid on the QA report at the point we measures. This is an all or nothing item. You either have all forms required less than 25% invalid or you don't. We don't record how close you were or by how much you were okay. We just record if it's over 25% invalid or below. So the target is 1 or 100%. So New York, so the purple target line is all the way up here at the top. South Bronx, you said you volunteered, so great, thank you. I'm going to pull you up. And you can see here, generally, South Bronx has 100%. All forms were meeting. And there, it looks like there's 2 cycles where you don't. And if I go all the way down here to the bottom, I can just mouse over that for September 2015 and March 2016, it was 0%. You did not have all forms less than 25% invalid. Again, we just don't record more fine-grained information than that to be able to show it here. And this is an all or nothing item. Also note, New York State, we calculate a little bit differently for this one. So because if we look at all New York State, someone is always missing, is over 25% invalid on some form. So if we looked at it, does all New York State meet? The answer would be no every single time, which is not helpful. So what we instead do is we average the performance of all programs in a cycle. So the number of programs scoring 1, the number of programs who got the point, who meet the item, divided by the total number of programs in a cycle. So we can see here for the September 22 most recent cycle, Moira, it looks like we need to refill in the New York State average on mouse over, but it looks like it's about 70% of programs met this item, and South Bronx made it. So South Bronx doing great on this item. In the March 22 cycle, looks like about 95% of programs across New York State met this item. So New York State has had a bit of a drop recently, but South Bronx has kept on it for this cycle, so that's great. And again, I can put this right-hand graph to whatever individual cycle we want to be able to see for one cycle, if we zoom in, what exactly was going on there. All right, I'm going to go to training, the first training item in PI 6. And this is one where the target changed over time. So you can see here the purple line was at a 4, and then it jumps up to a 5 for the September 2020 cycle. This is when we started using started including the prenatal training as one of the trainings we were looking at for the PIs. So before you needed workers to have had 4 out of the 4 trainings, then it became you need workers to have 5 out of the 5 trainings. So we can see here, if we look at all New York State, that's what the defaults to me when it comes up. We look at all New York State has been close, was pretty close to meeting, then had some struggles in this 2017 to 2019 phase. And then since then has been increasing back up with more and more staff meeting this item, having at least received the training, if not received it on time, especially for newer hires and newer workers. And again, this is another one where New York State average reflects the average performance across programs, not across individuals. Is there a program that wants to volunteer for your screen for me to pull up your information and share it with everyone for this items. We can see how training has looked over time for you.
I don't mind if you utilize Duchess.
Cool. Thank you, Nora. All right. So Duchess, for a while, you were at 4 out of 4. All of your workers had all 4 of the trainings that were required. Then for a little while, it looks like a couple of trainings got behind. Then it's caught back up to 4. And now for this last cycle, everyone had the trainings that were needed. Your program performance was 5 out of 5. All workers had all 5 out of 5 trainings that were required. And you're not totally out of sync with the all New York State performance here in pink of getting pretty close to the target, a drop in this interim period, and then climbing back up to this last cycle of being fully up to date, and all workers having the trainings that are needed in this most recent reporting cycle. Got a couple more individual items to note where there's a quirk or two that I think is worth pointing out. So we're going to go to observations. Observations usually on your PI report will say something like 8 out of 8 workers had the observations that were needed in the past year. That would be really difficult. And the next cycle, it's 5 out of 5 workers. And the next cycle, maybe it's 4 out of 7 workers had the observations that were needed. What we've done here is just converted all of those to percentages. So 8 out of 8 staff is 100% of your staff got the observations that were needed. And 4 out of 7 is an obnoxious number that I really shouldn't have used as my example, but it means 57% of your staff got the observations that were needed for that cycle. Now you can see observations when we look at all New York State. The goal is 100%, everyone gets the observations that are needed. But you can see all New York State has historically had a lot of trouble getting everyone all the observations that are needed. We've started trying to do a little bit more support around this item in the past couple of years, which is hopefully reflected by performance starting to go up. But this has been a tough one for the state as a whole. And so it's a point to keep in mind when you're looking at your program's performance. Is everyone getting the observations that are needed, especially more recently? So you look to recent practice. And at least is the trend on the upswing if you're not there already? And then, okay, thinking ahead, we've got a little bit of time before the next round of PIs. What can you do to make sure that everyone gets the observations that are needed for that next cycle as you plan ahead? For creative outreach, I'm just going to quickly note that this is the one item where lower is better, where the target line is 10% and you want to be below that 10%. Everything else, you want your teal bar as high as possible. And in this one, you want it as low as possible, at least 10% or less of families who are on creative outreach at any point in time. I'm going to go to 15, the Cheers check-in. I'm going to note this is one we've only started tracking more recently, so there's less data, but I'm also going to note this is going to change. So especially for these last couple of items, with the updates that we're making to monitor what's required for us to monitor by the new best practice standards, some of these items are going to shift. And so in some cases, like assessment timing, there are still requirements around assessment timing. It's just it now needs to be within 30 days of enrollment instead of within 2 weeks of TC's birth. And so in that case, we'll just update the definition. But for some of these later items, what we're measuring itself is just going to change. And in those cases, we're going to replace these items on the dashboard and start tracking them on the dashboard. And then over time, more and more lines will accumulate. So basically, don't put too much emphasis on these later ones at the moment because they are going to shift a little bit. But in some cases, really, we've been tracking this for less time, so there aren't as many bars to see. And that's fine. This data is directly from the PIs themselves, from the PI reports that we do. It is after that last comments and corrections period because occasionally we type something in wrong, and it's good for someone to for the programs to be checking and making sure that everything is correct. But this is coming in directly from the PI spreadsheets themselves. All right. I'm going to go back to the very beginning to total score. The target for this is at least half of the indicators that we have. half the total number of indicators. So as the total number of indicators that we've been tracking has risen, the target score has also risen. And right now the target score is at 8, as we've had a couple more indicators added on. So that's why that purple line is broken up and jumps up. But you can see, all right, in general, New York State is right around the target. And so when you look at your program, are you right around the target line? Are you generally meeting more indicators than all New York State? Or are you generally below it, which would say, well, okay, there are some system troubles, but maybe there's something going on at my program that I can focus on for the next round so we can get up to that target number of indicators. All right, so this is nice, and we've got some nice pictures here, and obviously we hope that it's useful. But one of the things you can also do with this data is export it to say, put it into your annual report or share it with your agency in a report. And I believe in order to do that, I need to go down off of full screen. And so here's the full screen button of the box within box. I'm going to say, take up my whole monitor. Right next to that, there's that box with the arrow down out of it, and that's the download button. So you can choose a format to download, and it will download whatever PI screen you are currently on. It'll download the whole screen, even if it's the bottom of it's not showing on my monitor right now. And you can download it as an image. You can download the data behind as a crosstab, as a PDF, or as a PowerPoint slide. So there's some options directly in here to export what you have. If you want the pretty pictures, take it as an image, as a PDF, or as a PowerPoint. Of course, you can also, if your screen has a print screen, if your keyboard has a print screen button, if you've got some sort of snipping screenshot program on your computer, you can absolutely use that as well. But hopefully the download items will let it be in a clean format for whatever you want to use it for. And I think you can include the page you're currently on, or all sheets and all stories from the workbook. So you can do everything all at once of just like, let's print off all of the pages. Or I just need the one page that I'm on because that's what's important for this upcoming conversation with my program director or with my agency director. Maybe, looking at assessment timing and saying, all right, we've had trouble with this item, or I know prenatal enrollment. I know we've had trouble with this item, but all New York State has had trouble with this item. Here's where we've gone over time. We can see that our patterns are consistent. It's not just about us. It's that this has been a struggle for all programs. Or say, hey, assessment time, we're actually doing great. All New York State has had some struggles with this, but look how great we're doing on this item. Our program is really strong in this aspect. So whatever is going to inform the conversations you're having, or if you want to take the whole thing and put it into some sort of annual report, you've also got the option of that. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just so I can see everyone's face and say, does anyone have any questions about what we've gone through? I'll say, I know there's more clicking to be done and more to be looked through. I know a couple of you have said that you need some account help, and we'll go ahead and work on that. But at this point, is there anything else you want to see or talk about, or anything you have questions about?
Margaret, could you repeat the reason why we don't see a particular bar in one of the years or one of the reporting periods?
Yeah. So
I just need to get it better.
Yeah. So if there's no bar, it can mean one of two things. For newer items, like the Cheers check-in, it's because we weren't measuring it back in 2014 because it didn't exist. We've only been looking at it more recently. So you've got a bunch of bars towards the end because that's when we've been measuring it and it's been part of the PIs. On the other hand, if you've got bars at the beginning and end and there's some blanks that are through it, that's because you didn't meet that item. And because you got a 0 or a 0% or a 0 out of whatever on that item. If there are random blank bars scattered through, it's because you did not meet and your performance was at 0. In an item like required forms, It's a 1 or a 0. If you were 26% invalid on your follow-up forms, you didn't meet that item, you didn't get the point on the PIs. And we just we haven't recorded, here's how close you were on every form to show you were at 26%, you were just over the 25%, and you were fine on everything. We just haven't recorded that. And it's scored as a 1 or a 0. And so that's how it's showing up here. So if there's random blanks through, it's because you didn't meet that item. If all the bars are at the very end and there's a lot of blanks coming before, it's because it's a newer item and we weren't measuring it before.
Thank you.
Is there a way to set your program instead of having to choose it each time? Unfortunately, no. This is something that we were struggling with a little bit as we were trying to set this up. And the short version is because of the way things are behind the scenes with having the row level security of what's available to you and what's locked, we're defaulting it to all New York State because otherwise we can't set what it defaults to as different for every person because it's all in the same dashboard. Because all of you are accessing and using the same dashboard as opposed to having a dashboard for South Bronx, a dashboard for Duchess, a dashboard for Jefferson, a dashboard for Clinton. We don't want to go the route of a separate dashboard for everyone because updating it, we don't want to update 50 dashboards because there's a much higher likelihood that there'll be mistakes in it. And we want to have as few mistakes as possible, as clean a transfer from the PI reports to the dashboard as possible. So it's because of decisions we made previously as this was getting set up behind the scenes. So unfortunately, you do need to click on your program each time. I realize that's a little bit annoying. I'm sorry. We think we had good reasons for doing it this way and that it would be a little bit annoying, but more accurate and thus worth it.
So Margaret, for programs that had absorbed a new county, like in our case, Clinton and Franklin, and now Clinton, Franklin, Essex, or in Hamilton, it's always going to be the global data and not just one at a time, correct?
If you are all part of the same program, then you get one PI report for that whole program. And so, yes, this is not split out. This is exactly what comes in your PI reports for each cycle. And you get one PI report. I know you've gotten two because of combined enrollment, but you get one PI report per program. You should get one PI report per program. And that's something to keep in mind for programs that are expanding. You know, you can always run this separately in the MIS, depending on how you have pieces set up behind the scenes. If you have site filters on, or if you have case filters on, you can set this up in the MIS to separate out Clinton versus Franklin versus Essex. But the PIs are combined. And so for programs that are expanding and that are encompassing neighboring counties as well, that's something to think about of just, do you want separate PI reports and thus should these be separate programs? Or is it really, this is one program, the dashboard is going to show you all as one program. You can do some stuff in the MIS to separate out some of those pieces. And that's the place to do that further level of digging.
Yeah. Which now it makes 100% sense to me when I'm seeing my own board, my own dashboard, that when we implemented Franklin and the changes in our data because adjusting to hiring staff or losing staff, and I can see that some of the trends already reflecting on the bars. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You have contextual knowledge of what was going on at your program at these times to either say, wow, this is why we did so great, or yeah, this is why we were struggling at this point. You know, this is showing what the data is. You've got the contextual knowledge to interpret it. And again, that's why this is one piece of what we need to measure, of capturing that snapshot, of going into further decisions, but it's not the only one. But hopefully this helps, gives a sense of over time, are things starting to work towards improving? Are things backsliding? Even if you've got reasons for it, okay, I can see that like this is not getting better over time. And so what else do I need to do to put something in place around this item? And so the hope is that having that historical component will allow you to use the context to make decisions. Anyone else? Well, that's what I've got. Thanks for coming. Again, if you have questions about your account stuff, If you can't log in, or you need something reset, please contact Moira. She put her email in the chat. I know a couple of you have said that you need some support, so we will work on that. And Esther will check out what's showing up, what's not. And like I said, in some cases, we might reach out and say, let's have a Zoom. It'll be the fastest and easiest. Instead of sending 10 emails back and forth, let's set up a Zoom so we can see exactly what's going on and figure out what needs to be adjusted on our end. Or if you're looking through anything else and you just like, I don't understand what's going on with this item, please just reach out to us and we will. And we'll be happy to set up a session just with you to talk through your dashboard. But hopefully this gives you the overall orientation. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming, and let us know as things come up in the future.